Which legends are quietly battling the clock while the spotlight dims beyond our view? From presidents and rock icons to silver screen sirens, these 20 stars stand on the brink of farewell, each moment a fragile encore you never knew was happening. Their hidden struggles reveal the raw humanity behind fame, turning triumph into an urgent, intimate countdown. Stay with us, hit subscribe, and help keep their stories alive before the curtain finally falls. Jimmy Carter. They still keep a light on in the modest plains. Georgia bungalow, where America's 39th president fights his quiet last battle. At 100, Carter is closing in on 2 full years of hospice care, his days spent mostly near the sun-drenched window, where he pores over letters from strangers who thank him for building their homes through Habitat for Humanity. The trademark grin flickers when he talks about Rosalind, gone only months before. Their wedding ring still circles his thin finger as a silent promise to reunite. Yet even now, doctors marvel at the will that carried him through melanoma that spread to his brain in 2015, and at the stubborn routine of morning devotion and peanut butter toast he refuses to skip. Friends say he asks daily if the world is kinder than yesterday. Viewers knew him as a one-term president. History will likely seal him as the longest-lived, most relentless humanitarian commander-in-chief, whose post-White House decades eclipsed his Oval Office tenure. When the inevitable moment comes, it may feel like a porch light blinking out, but millions of homes, free of killer diseases and crowned with fresh roofs, will keep shining for him. Eva Marie Saint. If you blinked, you might think the willowy blonde on that Hitchcock train has slipped entirely into fiction. But the oldest living Oscar winner turns 101 this summer. Press cameras rarely find her now. She resides in quiet Carmel by the sea, nourished by ocean air, classical music, and the letters Alfred Hitchcock once wrote her in looping ink. Age has thinned her voice, yet not her recall. She vividly describes bracing winds on the North by Northwest crop duster set, or Marlon Brando's nervous jokes on the Waterfront. Saint lost her husband of 65 years, director Jeffrey Hayden, in 2016. Since then, close friends say she feels 3/4 in the past, rereading scripts and tracing fingerprints of co-stars long gone. Walking requires assistance, but when fans write, she slowly signs each photograph, her pen pausing over the word love. Hollywood's golden era is almost entirely silent now. Saint's fragile heartbeat is one of its last audible echoes, reminding audiences that grace and longevity can share the same fragile frame. Dick Van Dyke. He jokes that he's nearly a centenarian chimney sweep, yet the 99-year-old dances between gym machines 3 mornings a week. Trainers notice the bruises more now. Balance isn't what it was when he hopped across London rooftops in Mary Poppins, but the spark remains incandescent. Van Dyke credits marriage to Arlene, 46 years his junior, for the smoothies that replace his beloved donuts and the yoga stretches that stave off curvature in his spine. Still, backstage at a recent podcast taping, he whispered that short-term memory feels like smoke through holes, and friends discreetly trail him at public events. Near-fatal car accidents, alcoholism, a surfing mishap. He dodged them all, yet time insists on its own choreography. The actor says he's learning to twirl with it. If the Grim Reaper shows, I'll soft-shoe him off my porch. When that final shuffle arrives, audiences may recall not just the laugh, but the ferocious optimism that taught generations it was possible to stay endlessly young if you kept moving. Mel Brooks. Comedy's last roaring lion turns 99 next month, and he still edits punchlines with the ruthlessness of a 20-something stand-up. But insiders on the Spaceballs 2 writers' room admit Brooks now sleeps between meetings, startled awake by phantom sirens he swears he heard in wartime Brooklyn, hearing aides buzz, knees balk at red carpet gauntlets, yet the EGOT champion refuses wheelchairs. Hitler would love that photo, he quips. Privately, friends say he frets about night terrors from his 1944 Battle of the Bulge memories, resurfacing sharper as the physical world dulls. Nurses note the tremor that steals a soup spoon, but not the timing. With each spill, he shouts, "Audience splash zone!" Brooks long believed nothing was off limits if ridicule could shrink evil to pocket size. Now mortality itself is his last tyrant. When the curtain drops, cinematic laughter from Blazing Saddles to Young Frankenstein will roll on, but the backstage will feel achingly still. Proof that sometimes the funniest man in any room is also its bravest extinguisher of darkness. Clint Eastwood. Behind the weather-beaten face that once squinted down Desperados, a 95-year-old director pores over the final cut of Juror Number 2, rumored to be his swan song. Crew members note the oxygen tank that travels just off-camera and the discreet earpiece feeding forgotten lines. But Eastwood won't hear of retirement. "I'll stop when the bell tolls, if it's in the script." Friends, however, see the tolling and micro-tremors of his left hand and the long pauses where words used to fire like bullets. Since losing longtime partner Christina Sendera last year, he spends Carmel evenings at Mission Ranch, watching the sun bleed over the Pacific, mumbling chord progressions to half-remembered jazz pieces. Doctors warn congestive heart issues could silence him without notice. Yet he shrugs. Another showdown, another dusty street. When that day arrives, Hollywood will lose its last lone gunslinger, the man who taught audiences that silence, grit, and a slow-drawn, nothing personal kid could detonate louder than any explosion. William Shatner. At 94, the man who first told us to live long and prosper is fighting to keep that promise to himself. Shatner still boards tour buses for his Live on Stage Q&A show, yet handlers now position an oxygen tank just off stage and guide him delicately through post-screening spotlights. He's candid about the aches, swollen joints soothed by CBD oil, tinnitus from an onset explosion, even a secret bout with stage 4 melanoma he calls the real countdown. Still, curiosity fuels him. Horse charity events, a new autobiography draft, and late-night stargazing that inevitably circles back to the moment Blue Origin's hatch opened and space left him wordless. Close friends say the endless fan questions exhaust him, but he insists on answering because it might be my last chance to say thank you. When memory fogs, he jokes the audience can finish the line, then watches their faces brighten as they do. The old captain fears a silent exit more than the exit itself, so he keeps talking, chest rising against thin air, determined to leave no story untold before the final frontier arrives. Rita Mareno, the only Latina EGOT winner, greets 93 with mischievous defiance and an ice pack for her wrecked knees. Moreno's Berkeley Cottage echoes with salsa classics she once danced effortlessly. Today, vertigo limits her appearances, and pre-diabetic warnings force her to trade espresso for herbal tea. She laughs at strict diets. Fantastic genes, she shrugs, but admits words sometimes hide just out of reach, like actors missing their cues. A December bout of vertigo scrubbed a Netflix talk show cameo, reminding fans how fragile their West Side legend has become. Yet Dawn still finds her outside, coaxing her rescue terrier along neighborhood hills so she herself won't stiffen into nostalgia. Inside, awards glitter on shelves beside a handwritten sign, "Keep Becoming." She rereads it whenever sorrow over lost contemporaries threatens to pin her to the sofa. When journalists ask about retirement, she points at the living room window. "See that sky? Storyboard isn't finished." But each day's storyboard feels smaller now, compressed into careful steps, measured breaths, and a growing stack of signed photographs stamped simply, "Con Amor." Sophia Loren. A silver cane and tiny tremor have replaced the fiery strut that once stopped Rome's traffic. Yet Loren, 90 this year, still orders cappuccino by singing the barista's name. Since shattering her hip and femur in a Geneva bathroom fall, she walks only with rigorous physiotherapy, metal pins whispering under Armani silk. Specialists applaud her recovery, but caution that another fracture could be final. She responds by scheduling a 4K restoration gala of her greatest films, because if the bones are broken, celebrate what's unbreakable. Evenings find her in a lakeside armchair, reviewing scripts sent by hopeful directors. She circles scenes she loves, then mails them back unread, because she knows the shoot would outpace her stamina. Sons Carlo and Eduardo visit weekly, bringing grandchildren and an iPad filled with old set photos. She studies Marcello Mastroianni's grin and murmurs, We were children pretending to be adults. When night pain spikes, she clutches an Oscar like a rosary and imagines descending that 1962 Academy staircase one last time without the cane. June Lockhart, the world's perennial TV mom, turns 100 next month, yet her lassie warm smile persists even as hearing aids squeal and handwriting shrinks to childlike loops. Most mornings she settles into a Pasadena sun porch, sorting letters from now gray fans who still call her Dr. Maureen Robinson. She replies in purple ink until arthritis cramps her fingers, then dictates memories into a recorder for the museum curating her career. Public outings are rare. The White House press circuit she once covered as a novelty correspondent now follows her only through C-SPAN flashes. Caregivers note weight loss and bouts of confusion. She sometimes asks if tonight's dinner break is for a Lost in Space call sheet, yet clarity returns when family appears. She'll recite entire Christmas Carol scenes she filmed with her own parents in 1938, voice steady, eyes sharp. Doctors warn that heart arrhythmias shadow her sleep. Lockhart nods, adjusts the crocheted quilt, and whispers, "I've had my series renewal. Anything now is bonus footage." Willie Nelson. There's a ragged majesty in watching 92-year-old Nelson hobble on stage, remove his oxygen cannula, and croon "Always on My Mind" while emphysema steals half the verse. Decades of tobacco, marijuana, and relentless road miles carved deep valleys in his lungs, forcing him to cancel high-altitude gigs and swap joints for a vaporizer he jokingly calls horse-friendly. Yet tours resume after each scare. Farm Aid can't happen without its red bandana patron saint, he insists. Backstage, portable nebulizers hum beside Trigger, the scarred guitar that has outlived 3 marriages and an IRS siege. Bandmates describe sudden coughing storms that leave him briefly disoriented. He responds by quoting St. Francis, "It's no sin to limp toward heaven." Offstage, he's gentler, writing haiku about Texas thunderstorms and tending hemp seedlings on his Spicewood ranch. Doctors predict inevitable respiratory failure, but Nelson bets against them, crediting martial arts breathing exercises learned in his 70s. "When the last note fades," he tells friends, "make sure they roll me up and smoke me one more time." The road he knows is narrowing, but it hasn't ended yet. Michael J. Fox. The boyish grin that once skateboarded through Back to the Future now steadies itself against Parkinson's relentless tremor. Yet at 63, Fox still christens each dawn bonus footage. Doctors warned him in 1991 he'd be wheelchair-bound within a decade. Instead, he built a $2 billion foundation that bankrolls every promising therapy and still slips into Comic-Con panels to swap ad-libs with fans. The effort exacts a toll. Spinal surgery stole his stride, memory glitches steal punchlines, and he quietly abandoned guitar when fingers refused G chords. Close friends describe mornings when he cannot fasten shirt buttons, but say he battles despair by rating each stumble just rehearsable slapstick. In recent interviews, he concedes the disease is getting harder to play for laughs, yet refuses to preview the ending. "I'm going out on my feet, maybe wobbly but upright." Viewers who once idolized Marty McFly now hold their breaths at every red carpet lurch, sensing the curtain could fall mid-sentence. If it does, they'll remember a time traveler who turned his own mortality into a moonshot for millions of patients still waiting on tomorrow. Ozzy Osbourne. "At least my voice still bites," the 76-year-old Prince of Darkness rasps, even as Parkinson's clamps his legs and forces him to concede he can't walk, yet I'm somehow alive. The Black Sabbath icon limps between handrails at his Buckinghamshire manor, clutching a rosary and muttering riffs he might never record. 4 vertebral surgeries, chronic infections, and tremors that rattle even the bat tattoo on his knuckles banished him from touring. Still, he vows a final gig if they bolt me to the mic stand. Sharon schedules daily physio while their children rotate night watch over sudden respiratory dips. Insiders say the family keeps a med-flight chopper on standby. Yet online radio shows continue, Ozzy wheezing jokes about borrowing Keith Richards' spare body parts. Listeners sense the clock. Every hoarse laugh feels like borrowed thunder. When silence finally swallows the metal howl, arenas worldwide will darken their lights in tribute to a survivor who stared down addiction, accidents, and now a disease that refuses encore. Bruce Willis. The smirk that once taunted terrorists in Die Hard now flickers behind faraway eyes as frontotemporal dementia unspools 70-year-old Willis's sentences into scattered echoes. Families shield him inside an Idaho ranch, where wife Emma labels every cupboard and summons childhood songs to coax recognition. Industry friends say he sometimes believes he's prepping for his next role, pacing halls with a toy walkie-talkie, rehearsing dialogue that never lands. Medical teams manage seizures, weight loss, and sleep wandering, warning loved ones the condition can accelerate without mercy. Yet every Sunday they wheel him to the porch, place a harmonica in his hand, and pray for one blues riff. When a clear note emerges, they record it for daughters who miss dad's late-night lullabies. Emma's upcoming caregiver memoir hints how close the family skirts catastrophe. We celebrate hours, not years. When the final frame freezes, audiences will mourn not just an action hero, but a man who met his toughest villain, time, without a quip to spare. Celine Dion. The voice that could shatter chandeliers now battles spasms so violent, doctors once feared her lungs would seize mid-breath. Stiff person syndrome, an autoimmune ambush that locks muscles into crippling rigidity, forced the 57-year-old to scrap every tour date and retreat to a specially heated Montreal studio where vocal coaches hum scales she can no longer finish. Insiders describe nights when a single misstep triggers pain intense enough to make her lose consciousness. Her twin sons keep emergency injections chilled in a bedside kit. Yet Dion records lullabies on good days, believing frequency therapy may coax suppleness back into her diaphragm. And she video calls fans to prove the heart will go on, even if the stage lights don't. Her surprise absence from Eurovision this month sparked headlines that she was too frail to stand, rumors her team did not deny. Should the final encore arrive off-stage, listeners will remember a singer who once outsang storms and then fought in silence to hold one last note. Val Kilmer. A scar etched from right ear to collarbone testifies to the tracheostomy that saved Kilmer's life, but stole the velvet drawl of Iceman. At 66, the actor speaks through an AI-reconstructed voice box synced to throat vibrations, yet breathes via a stoma prone to infection. Cancer-free for now, he remains perilously thin. Feeding tubes supply most calories, and even short walks around his Santa Fe ranch leave him gasping. Kilmer confronts mortality by obsessive collage work, cutting set photos into phoenix shapes he mails to fans as proof ashes can still fly. Friends worry. Recent scans show scar tissue tightening near his carotid artery, a complication surgeons call time-sensitive. He shrugs, quoting Twain, "Reports of my death may be exaggerated, but let's finish the third act while the candles last. If the flame gutters soon, audiences will cherish the echo voice that Maverick saluted, a testament that technology, faith, and raw will can coax art from even the faintest breath." Joanne Woodward. Once the luminous ingenue who carried the Three Faces of Eve to Oscar glory, Woodward now spends most days in a quiet Connecticut cottage where time drifts in gentle loops. At 95, she is the oldest living Best Actress winner, yet advanced Alzheimer's has folded whole decades into soft blur. Daughters Nell, Clea, and Melissa rotate vigil, taping family photos to cupboard doors so she can still tour her own life on slow afternoon walks from chair to chair. Sometimes she stops beside Paul Newman's racing helmet and whispers a greeting, convinced he'll walk in from the track any minute. Physicians say her organs remain strong, but the disease's late stage often robs her of speech. Caretakers soothe her with vinyl records of Newman reciting love poetry. His voice steadies her pulse better than medicine. Nurses note she brightens when a mailbag arrives. Though she no longer reads, she strokes the envelopes as if feeling each fan's heartbeat. The family has stopped discussing next birthdays and now celebrates each dawn instead, mindful that Woodward's final curtain could fall between one breath and the next. Tippi Hedren. The Hitchcock blonde who once stared down a sky filled with murderous birds now fights a more silent predator, dementia. Hedren turned 95 in January, flanked by daughter Melanie Griffith and a cake twinkling like studio Klieg lights. In the Instagram clip, fans saw only a cheery wave, But insiders reveal the party lasted 8 carefully timed minutes before confusion clouded her smile. Doctors report intermittent memory crashes that leave her unsure why strange lions, rescued decades ago for her Shambhala preserve, fill old photo albums. Yet the activist spirit flickers. Every sunset she requests the preserve's feed, nodding solemn approval at each rehabilitated cat released into the open range. Mobility aids now follow her like stagehands, and caregivers fear another fall could be fatal, but Hedren refuses to dim the porch string lights. "Predators need to know I'm still on set," she jokes, fingers trembling on the switch. Family members rotate overnight shifts, aware that a single nocturnal wander could end in disaster. Still, when grandchildren screen the birds in her sitting room, she mouths lines she cannot consciously recall, proving a performer's muscle memory can outlive even the mind. Shirley Mlan. In Malibu's Ocean Haze, the 90-year-old Oscar winner leans on a caregiver's arm, sipping only water because solid food now takes too much energy from stargazing. Recent candid photos reveal a frail frame swaddled in oversized hoodies, yet friends swear her wit remains dagger-sharp. She has begun sorting decades of diaries, records of Himalayan treks, UFO vigils, studio feuds, choosing passages for a memoir she jokes must publish before my last out-of-body experience turns permanent. Lunch outings seldom last an hour. Sciatica ignites like paparazzi flashbulbs, forcing a retreat to her sunlit writing porch, where crystal clusters refract afternoon light into makeshift auroras. Physicians monitor blood pressure swings and warn her brother Warren Beatty that a minor infection could spiral fast, but Mlan shrugs. "Earth School's about graduation, kiddo." Recently, she donated archival gowns to a New Mexico hospice thrift shop, telling volunteers she wanted strangers to wear stardust to the grocery store. Those around her read it as rehearsal for letting go. Each twilight, she asks caregivers to prop her up so she can salute the Pacific horizon. When the sun melts away, she whispers thanks, as if signing off another lifetime scene. Yoko Ono. Inside Manhattan's Dakota Building, the widow of John Lennon drifts through rooms like a delicate art installation, one part memory, one part unanswered question. At 92, she is wheelchair-bound, beset by a guarded mystery illness that doctors describe only as progressive and untreatable. Round-the-clock aides navigate her between frame-bedden photographs and an indoor koi fountain installed for therapeutic sound. Friends say she still hums avant-garde vocal loops, but tires after 3 breaths, eyes closing as if chasing sound into the dark. Real estate agents confirm she is quietly liquidating global properties, telling confidants, "I'm clearing runway for takeoff." Sean Lennon visits nightly, sharing rooftop sunsets. Neighbors hear mother and son count the fading skyline lights. A ritual, Ono claims, helps her feel John strumming along on the other side. Insiders reveal a living will pinned beside her bed, instructing that her ashes be mixed with acorns to sprout peace trees in parks worldwide. Doctors cannot predict whether the end will come by organ failure or simple exhaustion. Ono herself muses, "Departure is merely another performance art, one I must time perfectly." Phil Collins. The genesis of his fame began with furious drum fills. Its coda may conclude in whispered breaths. At 74, Collins admits in a 2025 Mojo interview he's very sick, tethered to powerful painkillers after spinal nerve damage left him unable to hold drumsticks. Public sightings show him hunched in a wheelchair, fingers swollen, frustration etched deeper than facial lines carved by decades on tour. Insiders claim he often forgets lyrics mid-conversation, a side effect of medication and chronic insomnia. Radar reports quote friends fearing he has 6 months left, noting he has stopped visiting his studio because the silence hurts less than failed rhythm. Yet music still pulses. On rare good mornings, he FaceTimes son Nick, coaching drum rudiments with tapping thumbs. Oxygen machines crowd his London townhouse, and doctors warn congestive heart and diabetic complications could escalate suddenly. Collins keeps a notebook titled B-Sides for Heaven, sketches of melodies he hopes to finish if one more pain-free afternoon arrives. Whether that day appears or not, he insists the last tour's title was prophetic. Not dead yet, just rehearsing the exit solo. Time narrows quietly, even for legends who once seemed immortal. Their fading heartbeats echo across films, songs, and the passions they planted in our own lives. Hold those echoes close, share their stories while they can still feel the love. Subscribe now so we can remember together before silence falls.